I'm Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked, Season 6, Magic Zones. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation, and Breezeway, a best-in-class property care and operations platform. Today we're talking with Sibylle Kim, the owner of a vacation rental business called Villa Ausblick in Waterbury, Vermont. Coming off last week's interview with Carl Shepard, co-founder of HomeAway, we thought it would be really cool and true to our industry to bring you from 50,000 feet up high down to earth, grounded, with a game-changing style of hospitality that Sibylle has developed with one property, her family's dream home, and the obstacles she faces in professionally sharing that property with guests. Let's go. Sibylle Kim, hello.
Good morning, Matt, or Matteo.
If I'm actually to pronounce your name properly, it's Sibylle.
Sibylle. You got it.
And the first time you ever told me that, I believe it was in the same vicinity as another Inner Circle member named Celine. But I mixed it up in my head afterwards, and I had in my head that Celine's name was Silene. And forever, I was calling her Silene up until she told me that my name is not Silene, and that's all thanks to you. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
I can tell you when that was, because I met her at the same time.
Was that in Toronto?
That was in summer of 2016 in Toronto, the first vacation rental summit. Success Summit by Heather.
That was Heather Bayer's first vacation rental summit. And that was quite a wonderful inaugural event. We had our little Inner Circle meetup there at that cool hotel up in the little private room. That was a formative event. It was the first time a lot of us ever met, right?
Absolutely. The first time I met people like myself, people that are have a normal life and do this on the side and realize it's actually more than just a side gig and figuring out everything on their own instead of actually having peers to learn from. And through your Inner Circle, I basically already had a head start just in terms of, knowing about people online, but meeting them in person was such a kumbaya event.
Yeah, it was. Kumbaya is such a good way to put it. I was thinking like a support group.
Yeah.
Everyone's like finally realized there's someone else like me. And I thought it would be cool to start for our listeners who maybe don't know you to share a little bit about Villa Ausblick, the property itself, and how it became a vacation rental.
Villa Ausblick is German and stands for Ausblick. I am native German from the southwestern part of Germany with a beautiful mountain, scenery. And came to the States in 1995 for what I thought would be a 2-year clinical research time, which is what brought me to Boston in the first place. And that turned into 5 years. That turned into meeting my husband, Peter. We pretty much on our first date, like the second question sort of was, what kind of winter sports do you like to do? And, we're both hardcore skiers. And so we always knew whoever the future person would be in our lives, so the forever person had to be, mountain person and a skier. And fast forward, we started our family in 2003, and then we had 16 months later, we had a second child. And my husband always said, in America, we have a home and we have a vacation home.
The great American dream.
This was before kids. And and I as a German said, we Germans, we have 6 weeks vacation and we rent and we travel the world for 3-4 weeks at a time when we take our vacation. There's no way I have a vacation on one day because it holds me down. And then we started a family, and then our lives obviously changed overnight. And so did that of many of our friends who had kids more or less at the same time. No more hanging out together. Everybody had to be home by 5 to put the kids to bed kind of thing. So when our second child was born, Peter surprised me and said, I took paternity leave. And I mean, that was not the surprise. He said, the surprise is I am home now for 3 months to help with the kids. And we're going to Stowe and we're meeting a realtor in Vermont to look for a house for a vacation home. And I was like, what? I have a 16-month-old. I have a C-section wound. I have a 3-week-old baby. And we're going doing what? House hunting. And it was in the middle of winter and there was like 2 or 3 feet of snow. And he dragged me through 12 houses. Over the course of 3 days. And I was so mad at him. And Then we entered this last property, which is located. It's a 5-acre lot, top of the mountain with the most amazing panoramic mountain views you can imagine. And we have surrounded by nature preservation land that will never get developed. And we have about 7 miles of unrestricted valleys, 3 valleys that we're basically overlooking. And our view ends with Mount Campbell Sump, which is the third tallest mountain in Vermont. Little did we know at the time that particular property, the views you have there, are so exceptionally unique in Vermont. Every time we have, I don't know, a plumber or an electrician or any kind of service person enter come to do service work, they stop at the driveway and they just stare and say, we don't see this very often. So anyway, when we did this 3-day house hunting thing, and I entered that home and I looked at the view, I was on non-speaking terms with Peter at that point. So mad at him.
I was about to say, yeah, this may have saved the marriage.
And I walk out and I get in the car and say, if we don't buy this house, you are in trouble. And this is a 4,000 square foot house with 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and nothing that a 4-member family needs. Completely oversized for our needs.
And could you guys afford it?
So here's Peter's answer. He says, of course we cannot afford this house. This is literally quote, that doesn't mean we shouldn't buy it. We just have to reverse engineer and figure out how we're going to make it work.
This sounds like a smart man.
And that was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, or in my life, I should rather say. That was the beginning of, so we closed in May of 2005. So this is now, 16 years in the making. And at the time, VRBO was basically the leader in online listings. And, I jumped on, posted the property. This was, before Airbnb was around.
Wait, so when you purchased it, was the plan to subsidize some of the costs with short-term rentals, or did that come about later on?
No, I mean, from the get-go, Peter said, I can wing 50% of the cost out of pocket, but we have to figure out the remainder cost through short-term rentals. And for me, when he said, if you can produce 50%, I'm great with this. That was code for, I'm going to show you I can do 100% cost coverage. So challenge taken.
Challenge accepted.
Yes, challenge accepted. So with basically, an almost 2-year-old and a 6-month-old kid at the time when we closed, I was given a budget of $20,000 to set up an entire house with nothing. So that was my first realization how many things are made in China when you buy bulk for everything. That was on a budget that was like, holy shit, China is really producing everything now. Sorry, I should have not said that word. The curse word, I mean.
It's okay, Sibylle, our listeners have heard it before.
So anyway, by summer, the house was completely, we closed in May, and by summer, we had the whole house set up. Don't know how I did that with 2 little infants and, living in Cambridge. We also, I should say, we have in Cambridge long-term rental properties, 5 long-term rentals that I manage as well. So between little kids, Cambridge real estate, and that was a crazy year to set that up.
And what, in hindsight, was the secret about furnishing that home, such a big home, with $20,000? Like, did you get furniture from secondhand stores, or what was the big?
No. So it's kind of it's kind of funny. 2005, there was no Facebook Marketplace, there was no Wayfair. There was literally going into stores and ordering mattress, picking mattress and picking bed frames, and going to, I don't know, TJ Maxx and picking out the bedding. So online shipping and all of that, I didn't do at that time. So it was a lot of footwork, manual, a
lot of searching
and schlepping and unpacking. And, thank goodness we had a minivan to fill it up to travel.
And how much of the actual furnishing was functional stuff?
Everything.
And how much was decorative?
Oh, including decoration. So fast forwarding 2020, the COVID year, I'll get to that in a moment, but a lot of things have been overhauled over the years, but definitely this last year was a lot of throwing out stuff and replacing it with, 21st century modern Instagrammable stuff. So whatever you want to call it.
We're going to get to the COVID stuff in a moment, but I want to really sort of zoom in on the process of taking a property that you love, which I think is some of the best advice that we can give to any people thinking about entering into the vacation rental space. If you start with a property that you love, all the other pieces kind of started to fall into place. And I would say oppositely, if you buy a place that you don't love, things just keep nagging at you. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the decision was not just the beautiful view. The decision to buy this particular house was a realization that we have, with little kids, at least 18 years ahead of us, where our nomadic lifestyle travel kind of thing is on hold. And friends that equally started their families. And this house literally was an opportunity for us to bring families with us and continue the social life we used to have as an adult, but now with children. And there's a time when they all go to bed, and then we would mingle again and be adults without, having to babysit them, and just be in the living room around the fireplace and just laugh and drink wine and do all of the stuff we used to do. And it's funny, at the very beginning, it's a 5-bedroom house. We had 5 families, with infants that they could squeeze into the beds or into the same rooms. Then when the kids became a little bit older, suddenly we shrank it down to 4 and then to 3 families. And so the way we have used the house, up until now, has always been around what does our family need at any given stage in our cycle of our family life, and adding to the house amenities that we wanted. And so now we basically have completely covered the entire phase of a family cycle. And that is what is one of the best features about the place. And that's why it is in high demand.
Folks, what Sibylle's saying here is really important. It's the first of several action items on how to find your business's magic zone. Create your vacation and rental homes as if your family or you are staying there yourselves. Listen on.
In addition to the fact that we have an outdoor pool and a hot tub and a pond and a sandbox and a treehouse and a fire pit, and basically everything that is what we wanted for our family was getting out of the city and going into nature and allowing kids to be kids. And mind you, this was before the iPhone came out. So, 2008, that first iPhone came out. I don't know what young kids are like today, but, we have this most wonderful time memories between, birth to, like, I would say age 12, where our kids were just literally offline and just being kids playing outside in nature.
It's a living property.
Yes.
And that was actually a tip that we learned in episode 1 of this season with Stephanie Farr. A way to bring on new property owners into a management program is to help people see that running a short-term rental business can help upgrade the home and can help bring it up to your standards, so that when you go on vacation, you get to enjoy the hot tub or the upgraded thises and that's. What I'd like to know is, how soon upon making this a short-term rental did you start the branding process? Because you are someone that is as exemplary for me in the branding and independent marketing side of things as anybody. How early on was that in the process to turning it into Villa Ausblick with a beautiful logo and website, etc.?
I would say the purchase of Expedia, of Vrbo, was where I really went into a different mode.
I love that. So you just read that headline and you were like, okay, now I got to do something about this?
No, I mean, we all knew this was coming, before 2000 and whatever. When was the purchase? I think December 2015-ish. I mean, we all had, when HomeAway basically took Vrbo, and, the changes started to happen already earlier, and I think the writing was on the wall. I think that's when I started to become more active. That said, I am no expert. As much as you make it sound, I'm a much better person at operations than I am at marketing. So I don't know if you, this whole idea of setting up your own website and doing all the email marketing and doing all of the, I'm trying, but I really am not good at it.
Yes, but you are good compared to somebody who has not created a name or a logo.
Yeah.
You did that early.
But thanks to your inner circle, that was stuff, the instructions to do. It was a manual that I followed based on other people's smart advices, and but I think the way it's really flourishing is because, and this is maybe a tip again for your listeners. Again, we didn't know when we bought the house what unique view it had. We didn't know how many, or how few for that matter, homes there are that are family oriented with a swimming pool in Vermont. We didn't know that the location of the home, Waterbury, it's nearby a highway exit. It is smack in the middle between Sugarbush and Stowe Ski Mountain and Bolton Valley, which are basically 3 ski resorts. It's half an hour drive to Burlington. Just the strategic location of again, location is the word here. So there's a lot of luck, but the fact that these unique things all come together, our property is just, there are not very many like that. Yet there are many, many families in driving distance from Boston and from New York who are looking for something like that. So despite all my intentions to create all this fancy marketing website and all of that stuff, it's just filling on its own. It's just, Anyway, so in terms of branding, I hear what you're saying, but I think there are audiences out there or people out there that are much shorter in the business than I am, that are doing a much better job of actually doing the marketing with technology.
And I do think that that's another good starting point, is if you're choosing a home that does have a unique selling proposition. And part of it is recognizing what is that unique selling proposition. So when you purchased it, you didn't necessarily realize all these things, but you have to look at it through the lens of a traveler. You have to look at what are the areas in your region that are popular. And what do you know? We do happen to be within driving distance of all 3 of these. That's kind of like a messaging exercise, no? Is that like advice you'd give to somebody who maybe can't figure out what their unique proposition is?
I think I would go back to what you said, buy with your heart. That, there are 2 purchases. There's either an investment purchase and it's just crunching the numbers and churning out money, or it's something that you want to use for yourself for a particular reason. And if you are looking for that, you're looking for the best thing that you want. And then you're setting it up the way you would love it and other people to experience it in that way. And I think the story comes automatically out of, whatever that story is.
And so this season, we're exploring this theme of magic zones, which is really another way of just a sweet spot, finding your definition of success that's not extraordinarily, impossible to reach, but makes enough money, satisfies your needs, has ideally some dream lifestyle components built into it so that you're not constantly striving for more. How do you and Peter define success for Villa Ausblick, and has that changed?
Well, I can tell you again, going back to our family journey, success for the first, I would say, toddler years until end of middle school years of our children was the time we spent together with other families, and the happy moments and the memories that we have. Mind you, eventually these kids become teenagers and think, start to discover their own interests. And it may not always be that house that mama and daddy love to go to.
They will love it when it gets passed down to them.
Once they love it when I book a week in the summer where they can bring their friends and they can just hang by the pool and mama cooks, food, and there's they can sleep in, and when they can be there with company. But when it's with the parents and maybe other friends of ours and their kids, where they may not be as close with them anymore, it starts to become a little bit more challenging. So in the past, we used to be there every month, at least a weekend, in the summer at least 2 weeks. And over the last 3 years that my kids have been in high school, our frequency up at the house has drastically changed. And then COVID had hit. So to go back to your question, the success, right? So success for me at the beginning was the time that I had as quality time with my family there and the memories we've built. And success today is certainly monetary, just to see what kind of return on investment the house generates. And personally as well, the human stories I hear from people that stay at the house and have special experiences themselves. The most acute example I can give you, literally just 3 days ago, I said bye-bye to a family that just moved in for the month of March and April. And this is a family, grandparents, adults, and a 7-year-old girl who all of a sudden in August of last year lost their house in California to the wildfires. And they had half an hour to rescue everything that they wanted to schlep out of the house. And they drove with a pickup truck out.
Wow.
And after 25 years of living in California, they decided that was the end of their time in California. And they just went with that pickup truck and just drove through the country, found themselves in Vermont, and decided they want to settle down there. And ever since that time, they've been living in short-term rentals, trying to figure out which part of the state they want to live in. And on Friday of last week, they walked into our place and everybody started to cry, literally cry. And the girl just jumped around and had her own playroom. And it's like, and it's like, this is a home. This is not just a vacation stay. This is like a home. And I said, yep, that's what I want it to be. I want people to feel at home there. I had, stories where somebody tells me, I didn't know it would happen, but I proposed to my girlfriend on New Year's Sunday at sunset. I had family reunions coming together because grandpa was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was their last time together as a large group. I can write a book about all the stories that I've heard that happened at that house. And that personally for me that's why I do this. I do it also to finance the house and keep it.
Talking about financing the house, because it's nice to say, I don't do this for the money, I do it because I love it. You've had some crossroads in your vacation rental journey that have forced some pretty hard discussions, some pretty hard decisions. I've been part of them on the telephone with you at times. Share with us one or two of those moments when you really started second guessing things. Because this is not a rosy journey. Like, I think it's easy for us to only showcase the beautiful, successful instances of short-term rentals done properly. But there are also really hard times when we need to have some soul searching, right?
Well, there are two kinds of stories, but I'm going to start with the operations, the running of a house. So this is not a one-bedroom or a studio or a 2-bedroom apartment. This is a 5-acre lot. It's a 4,000 square foot house. It has a pond with a waterfall pump. It has a fire pit that needs firewood stacked. It has a pool that needs to get serviced and maintenance needs to happen there. It has a hot tub that freezes sometimes. that we had frozen. People didn't close the cover and the heat pump went, and then the whole thing became an ice cube that needed to get replaced within 7 days for the next renters.
A really nice ice cube. I envision it like one of those fancy ones that you pour whiskey over, a square.
366 gallon ice cube.
A really expensive one. Okay.
Yeah. Required a massive propane torch to liquefy, to melt the block of ice, to then empty out the hot tub, to push it aside, and then to buy a brand new replacement hot tub and have it installed. And an electrician that needed to increase the amps or whatever he needed to do to hook it up in the middle of snowy, cold January winter, so that the next group of guests could have a hot tub because they rented a house with a hot tub. So that was one crazy story. And
that makes you second guess things? Are you like, at this point, like, what are we doing?
No. I never second guess it because this is, I saw my daughter take her first steps walking in that house, and I want to see my grandchildren see that same. I'm committed to that place because it is our happy place, and as long as we can do it, there's no question. There's no intention of selling. There have been people approached this last summer in Vermont, left and right. We want to buy a single family house because we want to flee COVID. So, I had the ad hoc person that just, basically cold called and said, can I buy your place? And prices went through the roof, and I'm like, no interest. So I'm committed to the property. My husband, not so much, I think, because I think he can envision we could do this in Puerto Rico. We could do this, And I said, you can't ski there.
So it makes sense to me that Peter, the more financial minded of this partnership, looks at what you're currently doing, and give me a very brief snapshot of what 2020, 2021 was like, or have been like.
So here in Boston on March 13 of 2020, we went into lockdown. That was the last day our kids were physically in school ever since. And so for 3 months from March through June, we packed up and we moved into the house in Vermont to be away from the virus. Vermont was one of the states that was managed by the governor the most proactively, and had for a very, very, very long time actually one of the lowest, if not the lowest, count of COVID. So we felt extremely safe being up there. I had, as everybody else, the rash of cancellations in the summer. And so the panic of, oh my God, how do we do this? Come early June, lodging was opened up again. And I had an instant refill of every single week that we lost and refunded. Not only instant, but... So
you refunded all those guests?
Yeah, I refunded everybody. Like everybody that was with...
Was there any hesitation there?
Absolutely no. This was the right thing to do. And I, on a whim, just said, okay, once lodging was back allowed, I just raised our rates, and there was no eye blink. People just were willing to spend more money on exclusivity away from everything with all the amenities that the house offers. And not only that, instead of our usual 12 people, the house sleeps up to 12 people. During COVID, occupancy in Vermont was limited to 10. And I actually have ever since that time kept it down to 10. And will never go back to 12. I will leave it at 10 moving forward. But the house was rented by single families. So I made more money in the summer with less people in the house. And it extended into the fall, and it extended into the winter, and it extended into the spring. April is dead season in Vermont. It's called mud season for a reason. It's solidly booked. And
wow.
So so the 3 months that we were at the house, I lived basically as a local for the first time. And it cemented my desire to one day actually spend more time there in Vermont than what we normally do. And by there, I don't mean necessarily that house, because it's too big for a family of 4, not to speak for empty nesters. But I could imagine buying a second property that I live there, that I don't rent out our Cambridge house, make more money here than I would do with rentals in Vermont. And if it's ski season, we're there. And I long-term would then, when now we talk about long-term planning, we're starting to fantasize about what our lives would be like when the last one leaves the home and is off to college. I am so desperate for packing suitcases and just being a free bird again and travel and explore the world like we used to do before we had kids. And I could envision, things like living for 3 months, especially now that we can do all this remote work and it works. I could imagine being 3 months in Panama or 3 months in, I don't know, Asia somewhere. But have this place to go back to. And as for 2020, other things that happened, so the extra money that we made is right away getting reinvested into upgrading the house. And by upgrade, I mean, okay, Vermont is now getting so hot in the summertime that you need air conditioning there as well. All the homes are, built in the 90s, or they didn't have central air. And so now we're basically investing into air conditioning. We are going to replace windows that are starting to fail. We are putting money aside for a roof that needs to go on in a few years, a new roof. So that was in terms of reallocating funding. And for the 3 months that I was there and lived like a local, I became what I would call what do you call people that settled the United States, that cleared land to be the first?
Like pioneers?
Pioneers, yeah. I felt like a pioneer, because so our house is on a slope. It's like it's a mountain slope. And when we say we have to weed, we have to constantly use chainsaws and cut down trees just to clear the views, not to have the trees grow too high. So we had this land area that was recently cleared. And I said, I want to build an orchard there. I want to have an apple tree orchard there. So that's what I did. I got down and dirty, and I basically cleared wild raspberry bushes that grew all over. I met a local organic farmer that specializes on that has a nursery. And, he came and did like a land survey, and he assessed where the best locations were to build this orchard. He showed me how to dig holes and make sure that, drainage is well. And now we have 3 apple trees, 2 cherry trees. Peter is already thinking about distilling, down the road. It's like, what can I do with the cherries? So that's where his mind is.
Would you say that like this vacation rental property has almost served like a vehicle to explore some of these other like fantasies? Like that's a pretty dreamy thing to have your own apple orchard. And now you not only have a place to do it, but a way to justify it, because it's almost like now a feature of the home, right?
Yeah. And guess what sign I'm working on right now with a burner?
I'm guessing it's a handmade wood burner.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's going to say COVID Orchard.
COVID Orchard.
It's going to be, there's going to be a big fat sign. It's going to say COVID Orchard, established 2020. And we will all remember.
Nice. Commemorative.
Yeah. And, the house has, other things like, the house has seen massive upgrades in terms of furnishings. I've been a massive Facebook marketplace shopper and have upgraded interior stuff, painted a lot. The other thing that I've done is the home safety inspection with the Breezeway. So I've got certified for that.
And now a word from our sponsors. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation. And instead of me telling you how great I think they are, or reading off of some kind of script that Andy or Sean sent me, here's one of the industry's most influential technology experts, Terry White, when I asked him why Point Central is such a game changer.
I use them, so I know the product pretty well. I would say their customer service is outstanding, but what they provide is, remote locks, thermostat, door and window sensors, light control, leak detection. It's pretty hard to beat. But when I was looking and I was demoing all these products because I was looking for the solution for myself, I had access to someone who used to work at Point Central, and he was probably very highly rated in the industry, had a great reputation. And so I had access to him. So I approached him. I said, I'm demoing all these companies, doing all this stuff. He says, you can demo every company that you want. He says, but I'll tell you right now, you're going to end up at Point Central. And so that's exactly what happened to outstanding company for sure.
I could not have said it any better myself. Point Central is now accepting property managers with less than 25 properties, which gives all of us the excuse to get a little more connected. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Breezeway, a property care and operations platform whose founder, Jeremiah Gall, was on our podcast explaining the following very powerful strategic advice.
I think it should be clear to the guest a lot of the work that goes into preparing this property. I think it should be clear to the owners in particular. I think owners are missing an appreciation for a lot of the work that managers do to actually create this experience. And I think owners need to understand that more, and that if managers, this is part of our mission at Breezeway, which is if we can help managers more transparently demonstrate to the owners the amount of work and the touches on the property that they do, the preventative maintenance, the asset protection, all the work that's going into property care, they should be able to charge more for those services because it's indispensable. You cannot provide that experience unless that owner themselves is dedicated to self-managing their property in a really highly detailed manner.
If that resonates with you, head over to breezeway.io/VRMB. When you sign up there, you'll get a free implementation service, which is valued at $1,000. Let's get back into it. I started this off by saying, like Peter, the financial side, he's got to be looking at what's now happening. This thing that you kind of believed in, you pulled off a pretty impressive feat in turning it into a functioning and profitable vacation home. And now, as a pretty much a prime example of the kinds of vacation rentals that are going to continue to grow within driving distance from major cities, standalone homes that are good for larger groups, remote and or secluded areas so people don't have to worry about germs. He's looking at all these trends and he's saying, yeah, this thing is growing. How do you sort of make the conversations about expansion or growth or buying more properties? Because for you up until now, this was always just about a home that meant something to you, right?
I knew you would ask that question. And here's my answer. I am actually not interested in growing the business in that sense of adding more. I have 5 long-term rentals here in Cambridge. I have the own home that I live in here in Cambridge. I have that house. For the past 20 years, I've been doing property management. And I'm yearning to slow that down. I'm yearning for different experiences in my, later 50s and 60s. And that includes travel. And so what I'm starting to focus on is actually, we're starting an active discussion about selling some of our long-term rentals here in Cambridge and have already started in investing in commercial real estate that is managed by somebody else. And in the Boston, Cambridge biotech sector world, you actually get ridiculously better returns on that than on residential housing. So this is where I'm starting to plant the seeds right now, that I'm starting to look at the long-term stuff we have here of shedding that. And I'm looking at the Vermont house. If we start doing more travel in our lives, it needs to be sustained and managed. I'm basically the property manager right now. I'm doing everything. And this is maybe a lesson also out there. Like, nobody does it as well as you do. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, as an owner to admit to yourself, to let go and figure out a plan of how can I maintain this at this level without losing quality of what I'm providing.
Sibylle's dropping real wisdom right here, so listen carefully. The upper boundary or limit of your magic zone or sweet spot is the point at which you cannot maintain that quality control. And teammates or employees, as you're about to find out, they can play a huge role in this.
And finding the right people that you trust, that are having the same vision that you have. And that is, I have to admit, one of my biggest struggles I have in Vermont, just because of it's not a very densely populated state. It's not a very, there's 2 kinds of skill level. There's no skills and there's highly professionals and nothing in between. So just to find the labor to operate the house. So operations is one of the big puzzle pieces that I have to solve.
And would you mind sharing, before we move on, your recent housekeeping challenge?
Everybody tells you housekeeping is what your short-term rental succeeds with or not. Like, if you have crappy housekeepers, the reviews will show it, and so will your bookings, the results in your bookings be. So finding the right people that do it with passion. The only way to do that in Vermont is to really pay a lot of money. I think more money than you should be paying. But if you have somebody long enough and you're not supervising because you're not on site, the quality of work eventually will decline. Or people age and start developing back problems and can't do the job in the time that they used to do it 5 years ago. So I found myself in that situation with a husband-wife team that I had that I really treasured and appreciated. But over time, it just started to decline. And I knew this 2 years ago already. And losing somebody and replacing them is I think this is, again, if it's a 1-bedroom apartment, it's one thing, but if it's a house that size, it is a massive, risky undertaking. And I was ready to do that decision, that jump last year after the winter season had ended in March. I was basically ready to let them go and then use the downtime for the summer to rehire. And then COVID happened. And when we had the summertime rentals back in session, I was not in a position to train somebody that had never done this job before so summers we have same day turnovers. Within 6 hours, the whole house has to get flipped. So I kept this couple on for the summertime. And then come fall, I decided, okay, now it's time to quit. And I will be doing the cleanings myself until I have found the replacement. So I have found myself in the last 6 months when we had, renters and then they departed. I kept the calendars blocked between renters intentionally for 4 or 5 days. And I would drive for 3 hours to Vermont, spend 2 days there, do the cleanings, and then drive back home. And I would be listening to you and Heather Bayer's podcast all the time. So that was awesome. In the car, right? So very productive time.
It was a pleasure to be there with you.
Yeah, it was. You were literally with me there 3 days ago when I was painting the last room that hadn't been painted. But it also gave me an appreciation of what this job is, housekeeping. And it is worth every penny that you're paying and more. And now I, 3 months ago, I started listing jobs and I didn't get any responses. And I don't know if that is because the economy is such that people still get better unemployment checks. And so that's very worrisome. It's like, holy crap, like I can offer work and nobody's applying for it. So that's when I realized there is no great, I don't know if this is in any other state solved, but in Vermont, there is no inventory where I, as a short-term rental host, could go where I could say a website that lists me all of the plumbers and all of the electricians and all of the housekeepers and all of, basically like a Rolodex of people to call. You have to find these people under a rock. And so I, through Facebook, ended up finding this young lady who is such a great story. She's an African immigrant, actually a refugee, and started her own business as a housekeeper and does it more professional than I've ever could imagine it would work. And she is basically getting groomed now to do this in the summer. And I keep my fingers crossed that it's going to work.
And so is that like, in hindsight, what's the advice to somebody who has a single superstar housekeeper that one day may decide that they don't want to do it anymore, may one day get a better offer, may one day start declining in their quality? Like, what's the hindsight advice here?
Well, if you have somebody who's done the job forever, I don't think you are having a great documentation of all the tasks that need to happen because that person knows what it is. And so I had created something maybe 7 years ago that was so outdated. Right. So I didn't have that. And just putting together basically the task lists and add to that the whole COVID protocol, cleaning, sanitizing protocol. How to monitor inventory, how to check the house after guests have left for inspection, like how to do, how to invoice you, how to set up payments, and how to communicate cleaning dates. All of that, I know that there are technology tools out there, and maybe that's eventually something we can talk about. I to this day, am doing everything with Google email, calendar, Google photo albums, Google Docs, Google spreadsheets. I have not gone out and done the Breezeway investment. I haven't done the Touch Stay investment. I haven't done the owner's res investment. All of these things that are out there that help short-term rental management. When you are a single person and a single property that we rent maybe 30 times a year, so I should say, so we are, the house, the year has 365 days. And I've learned early on, if I rent the house more than 120 to 140 days a year, the wear and tear by so many people in the house is so massive that the upkeep eats away all of the extra money. And it wasn't a win-win. Plus it would cut into the time that we wanted to spend there ourselves. So I historically never have more than about 30 rentals a year. And with the tools that I've described to you, I am able to do this, except It's all in my head. It's all in my it's all in my inbox, in my email. I keep telling Peter, if something happens to me, you're screwed, because I don't think you could just jump in and do this. But I found myself, with this onboarding of the housekeeper, putting together this documentation of what needs to get done, and having a system that tracks and does everything with scheduling. Like I need to do the investment into a Breezeway. It's not the housekeeping. It's pool service. It's hot tub service. Is having the plumber to check the furnace room, and all of the tasks that need to happen at this house. Right now, I have them in my head, and I have them in my Google Calendar, and that's just not sustainable. But making that transition into technology investment, that's where I think I speak for a lot of homeowners or single homeowners. Like the cost that you have, the investment that you have to make into these tools, plus the time to get onboarded and learn. It's because it's not just that. It's I talked about guest communication tools, about channel managers. All of these things. It's like a new job on top of an already full job. And if I can get one message across to all your wonderful other hosts, guests that you normally have that are in the software space, I bet there are way more single property owners combined than there are property managers managing many properties. We all have the same needs, but the hurdle to get into them from a cost point as well as from a learning point is ridiculous. It's so painful.
And the return is exponentially different.
Yeah. So that's my next goal. Like finally getting my inner what do you want to call it? The inner, I don't know what the word is.
I'm on the edge of my seat here. What inner what?
I was thinking German, and I said I cannot translate that. That doesn't work, that expression. So
what is it in German?
Mein innerer Hund, my inner dog. It doesn't work. It doesn't.
Oh,
it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't translate into English.
Well, I'm going to use it.
My inner demon. Maybe that works better. So I need to commit to technology, to software solutions, and this past year was all about home improvement stuff and operational, documentation and safety certification and getting this housekeeper found. And 2021 for me is going to be about creating the tools that will simplify managing this property remotely.
So beautifully and eloquently put. And I think that the biggest thing for me is that the tools are absolute no-brainers when the potential upside in terms of how much money you can make or how much money you can save or how much more efficient you can be is very high. That's when you have to go and use the tool. But there's a separate one, which is the amount of effort and limited resources that you have as a single property owner. And that can be almost more costly. That can even break like your mental state if you have already a full plate and you're now required to like spend 25 hours getting your property management software set up. So it's a balance there. And if the upside isn't significantly greater, like if you only have one property, your upside is not going to be significantly greater compared to somebody who has 100 properties, and the same investment in getting started is going to be significantly different. So there are two like really important things to balance. But what I absolutely love about your perspective is you recognize the power of those tools when you can get to them. And I think that's different from just saying, I don't like any of that technology.
No, I love technology, but I also have to admit to myself, I am decision phobic. So the idea of committing to one particular solution, when you hear, I did the survey that you guys did about, which
property management software selector tool.
Yeah. And so both times last year and this year when I did it, Hostfully came out as this is the thing for you to use. And then I'm like, wait a moment, I already spent the last 3 weeks in MailChimp webinars learning how to do this. You're telling me it has an email function in there and So, and then, okay, should I invest in TouchStay or should I look into what Hostfully does? And so it's this confusion, and, it's this whole plug-in and what does what.
Plug and play, right? Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And then, most of these softwares are the same way. It's like sign up for the demo and only then will we tell you what it costs. And so it's this inertia, and then another 6 months go by and then there's a new, hot feature that comes from it. And so that's where I find myself for the last, I find myself like a dog turning in circles, trying to bite my tail kind of thing. It's like an inner dog. Like my inner dog, yeah.
I think this is extremely valuable input and perspective for anybody in the software space out there, recognizing this really valid perspective. One of the last subjects that I wanted to talk about has to do with thinking sustainably, thinking long-term as opposed to just a short-term rental. And you, as somebody with one property, are not the usual vacation rental advocate that I see in other destinations, who's out there blowing the horn and rallying the troops and trying to mobilize and organize vacation rental professionals in your region. Typically, that's somebody with much more at stake. But talk to us about the way you view collaboration and advocacy in your region, first of all, and then I'd like to talk about some of the actual things that are happening as a result.
I've always tried to find in Vermont what I found at VRSS with Heather's community, or through your podcast series, like people that are like-minded, that care about being the best host that they can be and deliver the best experience to guests with the best properties, best maintained, etc. And so, I attended on a national level, even in Canada, these events since about 6 or 7 years. And I found myself being the only voice or the only person coming out of Vermont. Like I never found on a local level people that were caring about this stuff. And about 2 years ago, we had the very first short-term rental summit in Vermont, organized by a group out of Brattleboro, Vermont. That resulted in a Facebook group where we had about 150, 200 members. And it was always the same 5 or 6 people posting stuff, including myself. And voila, last week was the event that happened in Vermont that happened at so many other places before us. Basically, a bill was submitted to the Senate, to the House of Representatives, that had some good portions in it, but some that are absolutely not acceptable. The good portions are they want to finally create a registry of all short-term rentals in Vermont in response to the discovery that when COVID hit and the lodging folks could communicate with the hotels and the B&Bs because they're registered about what the new COVID regulations and requirements are in the lodging areas. They couldn't do that with the short-term rental hosts. So on a state level, there was a very keen awareness. Okay, we can no longer ignore this. We have to come up with some sort of registry. And there's also talk about let's have them be on the same footing as the requirements we have for hotels and B&Bs in terms of safety inspections. All of that is completely fair and fine. In addition, the third leg of this bill is mandating a 270-day residency requirement in the short-term rental by the owner. And Vermont is a state that has a massive amount of second home ownership that is becoming short-term, that has been used as short-term rentals. So it would basically hurt a lot of people, including myself. So out of nowhere, suddenly, there is a group out of Burlington that created the so-called Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance, vtstra.org. And for the last week, we've basically been fusing the Facebook group community as well as this new alliance membership forum to basically just suddenly out of nowhere, all of these hosts are popping up. And it's like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And beautifully, the script has been written, thanks to Rent Responsibly and your, the advocacy storybook that you guys already developed. So I think we are in a much better place. I'm currently working with the folks that started the VTSTRA. I have to get used to the expression.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue.
It doesn't. We're putting together basically the leadership team just to organize our thoughts and strategies of how to address this instead of everybody shooting wildly and just panicky and just thinking just short term. So my personal interest has always been, I just care about property management and having it done the right way and having it done safely. So completely unrelated to this, I started last summer this whole Breezeway certification process with Justin Ford, and that's going to be my little contribution, I think, in this alliance, that I basically am going to be connecting people that don't know about these resources that are out there already, Noise Aware and Minute and all of these tools that exist to basically monitor your properties and do the right thing as hosts.
And by the way, if anyone's listening to this and they haven't had that defining moment that Sibylle just described that took place in February, it will happen in your destination. If vacation rentals have not been defined legally yet, it will sometime soon. And there will be some elements that you approve of, and there will be some elements that seem completely ridiculous and not okay. Sibylle, what's the advice in terms of participating? Because most single property owners are thinking to themselves, I'm just going to leave this job up to the big guys. They've got the money. They've got the staff. They've got really what's at stake here. Why should a single property owner step up and what should they do?
Well, knowing that this would eventually happen in Vermont, I didn't know if it would happen on the state level or if it would happen on the local level in my town or if it would happen in my homeowners association. So the things that I can control is my immediate neighborhood, and I can control the relations I have to my community, in this case, Waterbury.
This is another really brilliant lesson coming your way. A magic zone's about being happy and living a good life, and you can't do that if your vacation rental business is about to be shut down. You almost have to do some of the things she's about to share in order to have any fair shot at regulation in your destination. Do not say we didn't warn you.
So many years ago, we in Waterbury, it's called Revitalize Waterbury. It's not the Chamber of Commerce. They call themselves Revitalizing Waterbury. It's an economic, basically, group. I became a member there. I have connected with the executive director of this organization for years. I have connected with businesses, making them know that I exist and that I sent them tourists, for their restaurants and for their shops.
And is that just Googling from your house in Boston? You literally just Googling online?
No. When I say what community, I'm talking the community in Waterbury, Vermont. I'm basically connected with.
How'd you find them? Did you Google? Did you go out in the street and ask around, or did you just start researching?
It's a 3,000 people village, and there's a main street, and there are some shops, and there is a website when you go tourism from Waterbury. There's and then you go to thanks to COVID, everything is by Zoom. So I've met a lot of these people now virtually. Even so I wasn't physically, in Waterbury. Things that I learned from your inner circle community is giving to the community just because. We had, what was that, 7 years ago? Waterbury had a massive flash flooding, and a lot of businesses were literally underwater and disappeared. And just rebuilding Waterbury was a big deal. So, there was big fat signage in our house. These are the restaurants you want to go and revisit and spend your money. These are the places that need your money more than neighboring communities. We had a local dairy farmer's farm burned down. I had never met this woman, but my understanding was that farm was the high attraction for all the preschool kids. That was part of the curriculum, to go visit the cows and learn how where milk comes from. So, there is basically, a GoFundMe page, and I donated to that cause. We have in the house pre-labeled bags for guests when they leave, and they have food that's not perishable. And that can be donated to the the local food pantry. Instead of driving that back, the food pantry, instead of driving that back to New York, here's where you can donate it to. So those things I've done for years, and I've made a point of communicating that to people in Waterbury that could possibly down the road look at short-term rentals as question, is this something we should regulate? And in terms of to my neighbors, we have we have 45 houses in our neighborhood, in our homeowners association. Granted, they're all about 3 to 5 acres of land, but so you don't really see your neighbors. But speed limit, that's like the big stickler for them. Don't go faster than 20 miles per hour. So you bet my guests know and are getting inundated about what the things are that they can get me in trouble with my neighbors. So I don't ruffle feathers there. So it's I guess what I'm trying to get to is it can get very quickly very dicey, but you can prevent a lot of that by doing your job, by screening your guests up front properly, by communicating with them the expectations, by connecting with your neighbors and sharing what you're doing, by connecting with your economics, chamber of commerce or whatever it's called in your town, and share these things that you're doing and how you're giving back to the community, by literally, on Instagram, basically tagging the businesses and guests commenting on it, and then the businesses understanding, oh my God, she's really sending me business to buy the coffee here at my place. And so don't be there just for paying your mortgage. Don't do this just for having for having the guests pay your thing and making a buck. Do this for the right reasons, and you will build up goodwill.
And there's more than just goodwill. I mean, you will literally be able to survive emergencies, pandemics, even if it's like a market shift or an industry correction. You've kind of built up enough of a cushion. And this even goes for guests who maybe don't have so great of an experience. Maybe there's something weird takes place, or there's who knows what. If you have done all these things ahead of time, you are so much better positioned to deal with that blow than somebody who maybe hasn't. And I think that's really the essence of what I love about your entire mindset and your business, is that you want to do things properly. You know that some of that takes time and it takes little hacking away at, and it's okay to get overwhelmed. It's okay to have difficult conversations. In fact, you kind of have to have them when looking at this as a unique lifestyle business. But you have to think beyond just this fiscal quarter. And if you have a good idea of what you want out of the business, you kind of get to control the majority of the variables. And that's a fulfilling process, even in difficult times, right?
I was just thinking about one more thing that for years I've been, hacking away at. So Vermont has an annual Vermont Tourism Summit. And I've attended these events over years. And I found myself to be, I'm going back now 5 or 6 years. I'm like, I've been here twice in a row and I haven't seen a single other short-term rental host. It's all B&B people, it's and all of the vendors at this event are exclusively catering to the needs of hotels, inns, and B&Bs. And I'm like, where is, I've attended Heather's conferences, right? And I'm like, where is the crowd here? So, and there was not a single topic on the agenda talking, at the conference addressing the needs that we as short-term rental hosts have. And so 3 or 4 years ago, I started writing the organizers. I said, can we please, I would love to come again, but you know what? The reason I don't come is because you're just not offering me anything that is of value to me. And we are actually part of the lodging industry, and we should, we don't even recognize my industry. And fast forward 2020 in May would have been the very first Vermont Tourism Summit where short-term rental hosts was an agenda item. And we had an organized event, basically in a breakout room where we were. And this was also communicated finally also to some, vendors that are servicing the short-term rental community. Sadly, because of COVID, it fell apart. But the mere effort, the Vermont Chamber of Commerce is not looking at us short-term rental hosts as a legitimate entity that is in this space. But they're very much in cahoots, I feel, with the hotel and the B&B and inn industry that has an old charm Vermont thing to offer, but it doesn't recognize that we exist. And the funny part is during COVID, lodging was limited in Vermont. And so there was a new alliance that was formed that's called the Vermont Lodging Association. And I hop on the site and go, yippee, finally, they're trying to work for us to get the COVID restrictions loosened so we can go resume. And on their mission statement, it literally states, we're here for the hotels, the B&Bs, and the inns. And one of our advocacy purposes is to regulate short-term rentals. So,
oh man, what a bummer.
So that's the other area that I'm dabbling in. And it's just wake up, people. Hosts, wake up that you need to get involved. And sorry to say, but in Vermont things move very slowly. And here we are. This bill is now introduced as of last week, and suddenly things are starting to fall in place. But that's where my passion is not just only the house. My passion is really to legitimize our contributions and our sector and professionalize it and raise the bar, but also work harder on actually finally being recognized as a lodging service provider in the Vermont mindset of legislatures and people that organize summits that think tourism is exclusively hotel, B&B, and inns, which it is not.
Yeah, I think this is, I really hope that some of the industry associations are listening to this, because oftentimes when we ask what is a vacation rental professional, the idea of, a minimum of 20 properties comes up. And I always throw out the example of Sibylle. She has one property. She is more proactive and thoughtful and engaged than many people that I know with many, many more properties. So Sibylle, while I know you don't consider yourself an expert or a leader in that sense, I would just like to thank you for certainly being one in my book and letting people know that it's okay for a leader like you who has never been trained before to have some bumps, some ups and downs, some really honest decisions, and recalibrate with people that you trust, like Peter. And really, Sibylle, I just want to thank you for introducing me to your inner demon, because that was a first. After all these years, I didn't know that existed, but now it makes sense.
Well, we would not be here without you and other gurus that teach us the way, so that show us the way.
Thanks for listening to today's interview. If you'd like to download a full transcript of this conversation, along with links to resources that we mentioned, and perhaps collaborate with our guest, each of whom are members of VRMB communities, head over to community.vrmb.com and click register. Our community is for folks who don't want to do it the hard way or alone. They want to use the path of least resistance. No reinventing the wheel here, just copying the best practices to vacation rental growth that are out there. We like to think that we have the most creative vacation rental professionals in the world, all under one virtual roof. That's community.vrmb.com/register.